Chicago, 1978. In the freezing shadows of River Forest, three small-time street thugs thought they had just hit the ultimate jackpot. They saw a Mark, an old man, well over 70, walking alone from his car to his front door. He was wearing a tailored wool coat that cost more than their getaway car and a diamond-encrusted watch that practically glowed in the dark. To these three punks, he wasn't a man, he was a payday. They cornered him against his own garage, pressing a cold blade to his throat. The old man didn't shake. He didn't beg for his life. He simply handed over his wallet and the watch with a calm, chilling precision, as if he were tipping a waiter for a job well done. As the thugs ran off into the night, laughing about how easy the score was, they had no idea they had just signed their own death warrants. They hadn't just robbed a wealthy civilian. They had just mugged Anthony "Tony" Accardo, the man who sat at the head of the Chicago outfit, the man Al Capone called Joe Batters, and the man who owned every politician, every judge, and every square inch of concrete in the city of Chicago. By the time they reached their hideout to count the cash, the order had already been sent. These three men wouldn't live long enough to spend a single dime of that money. And the way they were going to die would serve as a gruesome reminder to the entire underworld. You don't rob a king and expect to wake up the next morning. To understand why this mugging was a death sentence, you have to understand the man in the wool coat. Tony Accardo wasn't your typical mobster. He didn't have the loud mouth of John Gotti or the public flair of Al Capone. He was a shadow, a ghost, a man who reigned over the Chicago outfit for over 50 years without spending a single night in a jail cell. Accardo started as a bodyguard for Capone himself. He earned his nickname Joe Batters after Capone watched him beat two traitors to death with a baseball bat. Capone famously said, "This kid is a real Joe Batters." Accardo took that brutality and refined it. He turned the outfit into a corporate machine. He was the CEO of crime. By 1978, Accardo was semi-retired, living in a fortress-like mansion in the suburbs. But retirement in the mafia is a myth. He was still the ultimate authority. When those three thugs humiliated him at his own doorstep, they didn't just take his money, they challenged his omerta. They showed the world that the lion was old. And in Tony Accardo's world, if the lion looks old, he has to prove he can still tear throats out. While the hit squads were mobilizing, the three thieves, low-level career criminals who spent more time in county jail than in the sunshine, were celebrating. They were in a dive motel on the edge of town, surrounded by cheap beer and the spoils of their crime. They were looking at Accardo's watch, probably wondering if they should flip it in Vegas or sell it to a fence in Cicero. They felt like geniuses. They had outsmarted a rich old guy. They were talking about their next move, maybe a trip to Florida or a new car. They had no idea that the moment they stepped into that alley with Tony Accardo, they had entered a different dimension. A dimension where the police don't investigate, where the streets themselves start to close in. Every fence they called, every informant they bragged to, was already on the outfit's payroll. In Chicago, you can't breathe without the outfit knowing the oxygen levels. By 2:00 a.m., the outfit didn't just know who they knew what they were drinking, what they were wearing, and exactly which room they were sleeping in. While the thieves laughed, the outfit's enforcement wing was moving with surgical silence. This wasn't a drive-by shooting. This wasn't a quick hit. Accardo wanted a message sent. He wanted the city to feel the weight of his anger. The enforcers were the elite of the underworld, men who had been made in the blood of the 50s and 60s. They arrived at the motel not with sirens, but with master keys and silenced pistols. They didn't want a shootout. They wanted a demonstration. One by one, the thieves were taken. Not to a police station, but to the basements of the outfit's social clubs, places where the walls were thick and the music was loud enough to drown out the most primal screams. They were faced with the reality of their mistake. They were shown the face of the man they had robbed, not as a victim, but as a judge, jury, and executioner. When the Chicago PD finally found the bodies, it wasn't a discovery, it was a delivery. The thieves were found in a desolate lot, their bodies displayed in a way that defied medical logic. It was a butchery. But there was one detail that chilled the detectives to the bone. The money. The thousands of dollars they had stolen from Accardo's wallet were still there. Each bill was neatly tucked into the victims' pockets or scattered around the bodies, soaked in blood, but untouched. The diamond watch, it was placed right on top of the pile. The message was deafeningly clear. Tony Accardo didn't need your money. He didn't want his watch back. He wanted you to know that your life was worth exactly zero if you dared to touch his shadow. The thugs had died surrounded by the wealth they had killed for, but they couldn't buy a single extra second of breath. They had spent their final hours in a world of absolute terror, realizing that the easy mark was actually the most dangerous predator on the planet. Tony Accardo went back to his life. He ate his dinner, he tended to his garden, and he continued to run the most powerful criminal organization in American history. He died in 1992 at the age of 86 from natural causes. He never spent a day in prison for the hundreds of deaths he ordered. The story of the three thugs who robbed him is now a legend in the annals of true crime, a cautionary tale for the arrogant and the ignorant. It serves as a grim reminder. In the underworld, power isn't about who has the biggest gun or the loudest voice. It's about who owns the night. Because in Chicago, you can rob a bank, you can rob the government, but you never, ever rob the man who owns the city. They didn't survive long enough to spend the money because some debts can only be paid in one currency, your soul.